Hi, I'm Marcos, and welcome to Coming to the Faith podcast. On this episode, I sit down with Tim Wilson. He's a chaplain. He's someone who has an in-depth background in the faith and his journey, and he also serves and helps out with the recovery team, but I don't want to give you too much. So sit back, relax. Hope you enjoy the episode. Take care. All right, Tim, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, first of all. I'm doing okay. Good pulse. That's what I look for in the mornings, you know.
Okay.
Uh,
See you're got your biker get up, you know.
yeah, this is all George Flores' fault.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
All right. And how did our beloved G Flow get you in trouble?
Well, 3 years ago, I bought a Harley Davidson by mistake. It was an accident. I told my wife anyway.
Okay.
Because I came home, she's like, "What's that?" I said, "What's the accident? I didn't mean to buy it." And then George got a hold of me and said, "Meet me at Manny's for breakfast. I want to buy you breakfast and meet some guys." Okay. So I go there, and there's all these guys walking in with all, I figure, was he a Hell's Angel or what, But it's a Christian ministry. It's CMA, Christian Motorcycle Association.
Okay.
Worldwide organs in 39 countries, all across chapters. And basically what they do, like last year, they raised $6.5 million, and they buy pastors camels, boats, scooters, horses, whatever they need to get to their churches.
Wow.
And it's worldwide. So, once I heard, I said, yes, this is a good organization. And they do evangelism on bikes. They go to different affairs and stuff.
Okay.
And I said, you know what? I'm in. So I joined. And then George quit. He moved to Pennsylvania, so he wasn't going to be in our chapter anymore.
Mm.
And then he talked to somebody, and they nominated me to be chaplain.
Okay.
And I said, no, I'm not qualified to be a chaplain. Come on. Yeah. And then one of the fellows said, it might have been George, said, God qualifies the unqualified.
Mm. So
So I immediately called Gary. And Gary said, are you kidding me? Take it. So I felt a little insecure. And so I reached out to the University of Texas Theology, and I took a course and got certified.
Nice.
And at times I feel like, okay, I'm a chaplain, and then at other times I feel like I'm not qualified, depending upon, am I walking in the flesh or the spirit, which I'm not going to lie, it varies from time to time, like I just.
We're human.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It was easier just being in the world, I'll tell you that much, because you just do what you want, but I knew the end result of that, so I'll take door number 2,
All right. Listen, I'm glad you took it. I'm glad you took that option. Yeah. I guess, where we begin most of our conversations, it's like, all right, cool. I know Tim Wilson, and when I tell you have yarn for days as far as stories, life experiences, you're definitely at battle scars. But I want them. We're having a conversation, they're just eavesdropping. So what's for you, who is Tim Wilson?
He's a lunatic. Well, he's redeemed.
Thank God for that.
He's not who he was 39 years ago. Mm. He needs to grow spiritually, hence meeting with Pastor Bernie once a month, who delightful, a lot of wisdom from him and Gary, I feel like I got people I could go for advice, but I guess I like to make people laugh.
Oh, that
I mean,
goes.
it's, kind of good for you, good for everybody, Lately, I've liked to eat.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
I don't know. It's like, who is Tim Wilson? What day of the week?
I get it.
Is it Sunday, or is it Monday
I get it.
or Friday? I feel I like to help people with their addictions. That's rewarding because I know I've been blessed with going on 40 years of sobriety.
And yeah, and you here within the ministry, one of the things you also serve on, putting aside from the being a chaplain, you also serve in the recovery group here that meets here.
Yeah. There was a young lady that went to church here, had a problem, and I took her up to Walter Hoving home. And when she got out, I went to Gary and I said, we should have a recovery for people that, and he said,
Important.
start it, do it. So we started the meetings on Tuesdays. Now we, every Tuesday at 7, every other Tuesday we meet, and people come and go, I find. Like if you go to an AA meeting across the street on Friday night, you'll get 30 people every Friday night. A Christian ministry, it's a little tough for secular people to come in, and because we talk about Jesus, we review scriptures, so it's a little different, and we have people that I can name 6 off the top of my head come in 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings and never see them again and don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And then we have some steady eddies. So I don't know whether we're going to have 4 people or 11 people week to week. But I gotta constantly remind myself that if I just help one person that one night, that's good enough. That's good enough. I think that's what the Lord is looking for. And he besides here, I have about 3 other people that I help that are not saved yet. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is not only to get them, away from the addictions, but to get saved.
Yeah. No,
And
salvation is the pinnacle. It's the marking point.
yeah,
Because it gets you clean, but the clean didn't come by itself. There's something. I mean, granted, yes, you had to make a decision to get clean. However, you didn't do this alone. It wasn't sheer human strength, and that's where
right.
you guys base yourself.
It's a little frustrating, because knowing what you know and how good sobriety could be, how you could stop drinking, you can marry, you can raise a family, you can have grandchildren like I have. I have 4 now, and I see them destroying their lives, and you just want to give them an I dream of genie. That's it, and give them that mind that they can have so much peace and joy with the Lord, but they continue to go out in the muck and mire, and they just don't get it. Like you wish you could just slap them and say,
Yeah.
not literally, but it's just
Wake up.
yeah, it's frustrating. But when you see somebody that finally, calls you up almost after they were in ICU, like I visited a guy in ICU, almost dead, and then he called me this week, or he texted me. He said, started reading the Bible.
Super encouraging.
So, it's like, okay, you're maybe all that time you've been putting in for the past 4 or 5 months is maybe something's taken hold, so that's nice.
Yeah. And I get that. And that's, as someone who also, I'm involved in the ministry here too. I can hear your heart in that. Yeah, you'd like when you see people show up, you like consistency. But even if it's the one though, that one would receive a message so much so that their inner being is connected with that message and they have a life-changing moment of, hey, I don't have to succumb to this anymore. I'm no longer bound to my sin,
Right.
bound to addiction, bound to it's so much worth it. Because we have the biblical understanding, all of heaven rejoices. So
Yes.
if it's that one person,
Amen.
it's all so worth it. I actually heard a testimony, and the birth of the underground church in China was quite literally that. This guy, like yourself, went and got ready, did seminary, did all the programs, all that what he thought he needed in order to step into his destiny of whatever
Right.
the Lord was going to do in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out, there was one man that the Lord put in that gentleman's path, one Chinaman. He's thinking, I'm gonna have this mega ministry. I'm gonna transform lives, just any other, but through his own eyes, not through the lens of heaven. Turns out that one person he was just discipling, pouring into, just building up. That one Chinaman is the one who started the underground church
Wow.
in China. So we, in our finite mind, we often don't understand God's purposes, God's plans. He'll give us those glimpses of like, hey, do this, set it up this way, but it's not always that way. His ways are higher, his plans are greater. So to have that impact and to hear you say that actually encouraged me, because even if the one shows up, it's like, you know what, God, you sent that person. You orchestrated this meeting, this moment. So I'm going to do my part in honoring you and speaking into this person's life and sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
So just be encouraging. I get it. In our human, finite selves, it can be like, oh, wow, but it's not a numbers game. To the Lord, the one is worth. If it was a sea of people, it's the same thing to him.
Right.
So just be encouraged in that.
Yeah, and sometimes when there's only a few, it's like a divine appointment.
Yeah.
Because if this person would have been there, we may not have been able to address this person's problem. They might have been intimidated not to talk, or so it's I just got to leave it up to God. It's it's His ministry. I just want to serve in it. I want to remain humble, and I know anything good that comes out of it's all God. It's not
all pointing back to Him.
It's not me. I just it's frustrating, but it's rewarding.
And the understanding of knowing what we know.
Yeah.
We may not see that reward here, but trust me, it doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah.
That reward does not go unnoticed. Even if in the moment it may not seem, it's like, all right, well, no, because to the Lord, He sees beyond our scope. His vantage point is far greater. So for us, it's like, yeah, we get that glimpse of like, you know what? Wow, this is worth it. But the reward of that effort does not go unnoticed by the Father. So definitely be encouraged in that, because it's A, we're not doing it for that, and B, the truth is we may not see it on this side of eternity, but there's coming a day when we will. So walking ministry, walking this life of cruciformity, walking this life as disciples of Jesus, it's just keeping that before us.
Right.
Keeping that mindset.
I got to remind myself it's His meeting.
Yep.
It's the one thing I noticed though is when you bring God into your addiction, you have a much better chance of recovery. And that's one of the steps that, like I'll always tell people, He delivered me like that. For 7 years. I tried to get sober and I couldn't. And then me and my wife lost a set of twins. And I went down in the chapel at the hospital. I got on my hands and knees and I said, thank you. I think at the time I was only sober like 18 months and I couldn't go a whole year. And I said, thank you, Lord, that I'm here with my wife, that I'm not out on a binge drinking for 3, 4, 5 days like I would do. I said, thank you that I'm here to go through this with her. And I said, well, I got your attention. Could you know how weak I am? Can you please just take this drinking from me? And since that day, I haven't been that much tempted to drink. And before that, I couldn't go 6, 7 months. If someone come out and I'd go on a binge, and I'd be, bar to bar and posses trying to figure out where I am next. But I was clever. I was 2 bars ahead of them all the time. But yeah, it was, so I just, and right then and there, and that was 1986, I believe, 80, 85, 86.
All right. But before you get to that point, though,
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about your transforming moment. I want to hear about your aha, like Tim is literally met by the Lord. Your come to faith moment. That's why we're here. But if you could just speak a little bit, what was the upbringing like? What was life like for Tim leading up to it? Because I'm fairly confident saying there's no way that you entered the world and said, I want to pick up drinking, or I'm going to do this, or what have you. So leading up to the moment in which you said you made a conscious decision for Christ, what was Tim like? What was that journey like?
Grew up right around the corner from here. 5 boys, 1 girl, Irish Catholic. Brought up in a drinking environment. Started drinking in high school, in the parking lot before school. Rum and cokes, pot, pills. But so by the time I was 24 years old, I was I couldn't function. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't drive past a bar without stopping in. I was an unemployable drunk by the time I was 24.
Wow.
Christmas Day, 1979, I went in rehab up at Reynolds Hospital. I called my mother. I was laying on the ground outside. I was living at, by that time was living in a rooming house, and I couldn't open the door with the key. I was so drunk, and I had a 3-piece suit on that I had on for 3 days. I'd been fired from a company. I went to their Christmas party. They said, you can't come in here. I said, I'm coming in, or I'll knock all the food over and I'll throw you on the ground. And so I went in and I went crazy for 3 days. I woke up, called my mother. I said, I got to quit. And I went to Reynolds Hospital, and I was there for 2 weeks. And my mother came out. She went in the hospital. She had to amputate her leg, and then that was, and then day after St. Patty's Day, 1980, she died. But one of the things she said before she died, she said, you don't need booze for a personality. She goes, you stop drinking, you can have a normal life. If you keep drinking, you're not going to have a good life. 40 years later, took me a while to get there. So it was a crazy childhood, always fighting, carrying on. Got in a lot of fights when I was younger. I was always smaller, but I had 3 older brothers, and one used to give me a lot of different beatings. So he made me tough. And I got to the point where, okay, I'm sober now, but everything's not, everything wasn't in place. And I for years growing up, I thought that God was always punishing me when I was bad. And that was often, broken arms, stitches, just all kinds of stuff. Fractured pelvis, dislocated shoulders, legs.
No, yeah, no, you definitely have
You know,
the battle scars.
yeah.
You know.
And then finally, I bought a house, and I was about to lose the house. I was living in Galway.
Around when was this? Like, is this Tim as an adult?
1990, I think I bought the house.
Okay.
1990 or 89.
Okay.
I bought the house, and there was a fire down the street from the house, and two of the kids that lived in that house, they perished. My daughters used to hang out with them, and the uncle perished, and I kicked the door and I went in the house to try and get the kid out, and I was overcome with smoke because one woman, she jumped out a window, and I grabbed her, I brought her next door, and I ran around, and I pulled the storm door right off, and I kicked the door in, and because of the window up top, the smoke came out of the kitchen. Evidently, the kid that lived there, he put a can of pork and beans full of gas on the stove, and he put 6 bottles of gas in the oven, and he left. He was schizophrenic. He left. And so I kicked in the basement window. I started crawling in the basement window, and a cop pulled me back and said, "Nope, you can't go in there." I said, "The kid's in there. He's shining a flashlight." He says, "That bed hasn't been slept in." And I got depressed over that. Like, that really bothered me. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do nothing. And I kept making excuses, but I got real lazy, and I was about to lose the house, and I got sent out on a job to the refinery. And I'm working with this guy, and I'm starting to make money to get my house back, So things are looking pretty good. And I'm working with this guy, and finally one day I was like, "Who the hell are you?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "You're like the only guy I know. I'd let you marry my daughters. Like, how did you get like this?" He said, "Well, I was in a drug deal, and I got shot." He says, "And I started going to church and reading the Bible." And he says, "And everything changed for me." He goes, "Now I'm going to heaven." He goes, "How about you?" I said, "No, no, I'm not going there." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because of all the stuff I've done." And he goes, "Well, you can go to heaven." And I was like, I never went to Catholic school. I didn't, half the time when the priest was talking, I was in church. I was like, doing something to my brothers or getting slapped by my father for doing something wrong. But I didn't pay attention. I didn't know any of that stuff. I got thrown out of catechism class, for God's sakes,
Yeah.
And so he says, "No, you can go to heaven." I said, "Really?" I said, "Is there any paperwork involved?" He goes, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "No, there's no paperwork." So he says, you just say this simple prayer, and you ask the Lord to forgive you of your sins, and you recognize the fact that, he died, and 3 days later he resurrected, and you'll be saved. I said, "Really?" So I said that prayer, and he said, "You want to go to church on Sunday?" I started going there, and wasn't there very long before I became an usher. I was going to Bible studies. We were holding a Bible study, and I was like, started evangelizing in the inside the refinery with guys, and I got really, really involved. I caught fire, and then the fire went dim, the fire went out, and I became a prodigal, and I guess it happens for a reason. I learned a lot, but kept seeing Gary all over the place. I'd be like, "Oh, can't even go to movies. Here's Gary. Come back, come back."
It's almost as if the Lord strategically kept that reminder in front of your face. Hey,
Yeah, and I always adored,
not to say that Gary is God.
Yeah.
However, just that reminder, hey, the Father,
right.
I have my eye on you. You can't go too far because there will be that reminder before you.
And at that time, Gary was a worship leader. So I never really heard him preach a lot, but he was always so kind and loving. He was always so nice. And, a bunch of us carpenters, they were redoing it. We were over there sheetrocking. We were doing a lot of work over there. And, why don't you go out for the cantata? And he directed the cantata. I was there with
I actually did see that,
Romeo.
for the record. I
Yeah.
actually did see a production that was put on in Calgary, and I saw young Tim Wilson.
Yeah, Romeo played Jesus back then.
Mm.
I mean, Gabby was in it. There was, it was, like I wish I never walked away because I would be that much further ahead spiritually. But I don't know why. Just that sinful nature, the flesh. It's
This is a very real thing.
It's right. It's powerful, and I have to constantly remind myself that he's more powerful than any flesh. But
So
with all the years I had out in the world, like I didn't get saved when I was 16 or 12. I wasn't brought up in this,
Yeah.
So you had these worldly habits that you're so used to, I was barroom brawls, fighting, drunken, chasing women, going, just doing whatever I wanted to do, And then to all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I'm a Marine now. I can't, It's like it's a big change, and it's the transformation. Like I always, I would say, Lord, please expedite my growth. But it's His timing. He knows best. He knows me, and it's His show. I'm just, I just got to do what He wants, and some days I'm very obedient, and some days, I wouldn't even want to share my thoughts, be honest,
and at pretty sure that at this point, so how old would you say when you made that decision for Christ? How, more or less, how old were you? Doesn't have to be exact, but just ballpark.
Let's see, Taylor's probably 33 years old.
Okay, so you're 33 years old. You make that decision. You find a community because of the connection. You may start connecting with people there. But then you said you had a hiccup. So, like yourself, I too had one. I've had multiple.
It was
So
it was a big burp.
yeah.
It was
So I get that. But all right, so you have that moment. You kind of fall off, as it were. You kind of drift away. So then, what leads you then? From that point, then, how do you reconnect yet again? Because you're saying, seeing Gary here, I'm seeing, I'm getting this constant reminder. So from that point, you've accepted the Lord. You said you're about 33 years old. You find a community in Calvary and you're connected. So now, fast forward though, you said you kind of fell astray again. You kind of fell off, but you always had that reminder. So what does that look like from that point forward?
Before I answer that, even when I was away from the Lord, if I had an opportunity to evangelize, I would.
Really?
I would still tell people, yeah.
Wow. I wasn't that guy.
Because I knew the truth,
Yeah.
But you kind of felt like a hypocrite because I wasn't walking that life.
Yeah.
But I could tell you how to walk it, for your own good. But, and then it was the little guy because, my granddaughter had, first I went all through that spleen thing that happened to me in 2010. And then 2016, my granddaughter had open heart surgery at 8 days old. My wife got cancer. So, I retired. I was 60. I retired because I've had, 4 knee, 4 shoulder, all kinds of, physical stuff. And finally the surgeon said, that's it, you're done. Let me just, he said, I could replace your shoulder or you can go back to work. He goes, or you can not go back to work and I'll put you on permanent disability. I said, I'll take door number 2.
Mm.
My wife said, you can't retire. You'll drive me crazy. A month later, she's diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was there. I took her to every treatment up to Hackensack. Every treatment. I was there for after surgery to help her out. And finally, one day on the parkway, she goes, all right, I guess it's good you're retired, you know. But,
His ways are higher.
yeah. And like even that, and that, you know, my granddaughter and that, and then bring me back. But then when the 6-month-old, little Aiden, when he got sick, that's when I called God. And that was, all right, I had enough. Like, I was ashamed because that I couldn't pray for my grandchildren because I wasn't under the Lord's covering. And that really bothered me. And then I guess the Lord was, I just came back. And then when I came here, I remember that went up. It was an altar call, but I went up on the left-hand side and I started crying and sobbing. And Gary was talking to me. And then I remember one day out here in the tent, Jim and Kathy Nelia were praying for me, and I was like sobbing. You know, I just felt like, you know, but it felt so good that I was back, you know. And it was just like, okay, you know, and then, you know, just took a couple of years, and then, you know, and Gary kind of knew that, you know, I, you know, had the problem with alcohol and stuff. So, and then when I started the ministry, and like now I was experimenting, going to a church up by me, spirit-filled, Bible-believing. I just did an online course with a sister church in Bridgewater, Evangel Chapel, spiritual. And I had this book, and I asked Bernie. He says, "No, read that. It's great. You know, do that." And but so people up by me, when I evangelize, and I try to, do what I can to share the gospel with them. And I figured they're not going to want to drive all the way down here to church. So I wanted an alternate church for weather for me that I could go to, but have another church up there. So I could say, well, you don't have to come with me, but go to this church. So it's not an hour drive, but I just, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been driving back and forth.
No, I love it. Especially when the weather's nice. I love watching you ride up to EG on your hog. Tim's here, and I think that's the coolest thing for me. Like it's kind of like how Gary kind of geeks out with Bob. Like, he was a hippie, he had a shag rug minivan or whatever. As I see Tim. Yeah. I see you roll up to the property. Tim's here.
And I was never a biker. Like, I had a bike when I was like 18, 19, but I was so crazy on that, like, jumping over bridges and stuff. And then finally I was like, I got to sell this. I'll kill myself. And I got rid of it. I had 2 of them. I got rid of it. And I didn't drive. I didn't ride for 47 years. And then somebody suggested, well, if you're going to take the course, so I took a course, got the Harley, and yesterday I was out on it. And the day before, I went out for wind therapy, like just driving around, listening to this new guy I got. I love his music. I'll never find it. Oh, did you ever listen to Jordan Smith?
Jordan Smith.
No, yeah. Not familiar. He was on The Voice. And he sang Mary, Did You Know?
Oh, well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Chris Renzema.
Okay.
You listen to him? I like the harmonica, but he's his songs, like Zach Williams. Zach Williams talks about, he sings about like, I don't want my Bible to be a coaster anymore. Like songs like, that are kind of related to to addiction, but they're good. Like that's my kind of music. Like, but I listen to everybody. But I get on the bike and I just drive around, listen to that for an hour, and I'm good to go.
And it's really interesting, like I said, because like I've developed a relationship with you. I've you are one that you have stories for days, and the one thing I can definitely appreciate is that I see the Tim that's sitting next to me this interview, which I bless God that we have this opportunity. But I hear your stories, and it's to the lay person to hear who Tim was and to see today where Tim is, who Tim is now, because of his mercy, because of a decision you made, because of a decision you choose to make daily in placing your trust in him, in continuing to pick up your cross and follow Jesus, to continue to bear witness. Because that's the other thing I absolutely love about you. And I'm not just saying this because you're sitting next to me. In my mind, and this is not a judgment, so understand my heart in this, but I see the people you invite. I see the people that you invite to your meetings. I see the people, and I'm like, Tim is that guy. In that I'm not much different than you. I was you. But there's hope. There's a new chapter. It's not all done. I think about someone like Lou, your good friend. I see that brother every Sunday, and I can honestly tell you, when I see him, I'm encouraged. I'm blessed. Because I remember when Lou showed up, I remember the connection with you. And then I see the Lou today, and I'm like, this is night and day. It's not even close. And I want to encourage you in that, because I see the Lord's hand in your life in that.
Yeah.
Where you're basically like all the rough guys, all the union workers or the carpenters or all those guys, the sturdy type, like, the blue collar guys. Those are the people that you're ministering to, and people are coming to the knowledge of Jesus because of your willingness, because of your obedience, and because they knew you. There's a background. There's equity. There's relational equity there, that they're like, man, I remember Tim Wilson when Tim was a kid or much younger. Look at him now. If he could do this, there's got to be something to it. So I say all that to say, if I'm encouraged by that, how much more isn't the Father pleased by that?
Yeah.
And your willingness and your obedience to be like, all right, I'll do this. And you don't make it fancy.
Yeah.
There's no massive fanfare. You're like, hey guys, this is who it is. This is what I'm about. This is who Jesus is. Very black and white. You don't try to overdo it. So I think that's cool. And I have a great admiration for that.
It's a two-sided coin, because some people look at me and my past, and they like, yeah, he needed Jesus. There's a guy that needed God, but in their pride, but me, I was never like Tim Wilson, so I don't need God, but it doesn't matter. Yes, you do. You do. Like Louis, I was working with him, and I was, sharing the gospel with him, and then finally he called me up. He said, I did it. I accepted Jesus, but I'm not going to church. I said, all right. So I gave him about 4 weeks. Finally, I went in to work. I said, you're going to church, and you're going to his son. Okay. And he came to church, and now he's in the front row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just yet another reminder of God's faithfulness. And it doesn't matter who you are or how far gone you may seem to think that you are. You're never too far for him. It just takes that first step.
Right.
And making a conscious decision like you did all those years ago. And it's not to say that you didn't fall sins. You're not perfect because of it. And something that I've shared on this podcast, and something that's been shared in this house, and many people have said it. Just because you're a Christian doesn't make you perfect. You're not sinless. It brings up the awareness to make you want to sin less.
Right.
But it's not to say that, because you a confession of faith, and because you're putting your trust in Jesus, well, you're not going to have a bad day. You're not going to stub your toe and maybe say something that's not appropriate for minors under the age of 18.
Yeah.
No, you're not. But that's not to say that, okay, that's disqualified you.
Right.
The blood of Jesus is far greater than that. It speaks a far greater thing than the circumstances, situation, your hiccup, your mess up. And even when it is a royal mess up, even in that, there's still mercy. So it's an encouragement. Your story, your testimony,
Yeah.
is definitely one that I'm like, you know what, God knew what he was doing when he made it to him.
I feel like I live on grace sometimes.
Just you?
You know, and you think about it, like, let's take 50 of me that were as cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs as I was, right? And you know how much grace that is?
Yeah.
It's boundless, and it has to be boundless because he knows, God knows, like the only one was sinless is Jesus. And sometimes I'm like, how did you do that? But he's God,
It's funny you bring that up, that specific topic, because I actually had this conversation with someone who I love dearly, and I had this epiphany. That same thought, I was sitting in the prayer room, and I was thinking about somebody, and I was quite literally just thinking about them, like, it's like, oh, their life, and they're so young, and it's like they can absolutely like turn this around, and nothing is impossible for God. And I went that approach, and then the Lord takes me, I believe it was Romans 5:20, and I'm gonna paraphrase it, different versions of it, but where sin abound, grace abound all the more. Grace was great, and
without it,
just to hear you say that, and yet another reminder, it's like, no matter how far gone or how messed up I may feel, or I may view someone else or a specific situation or something, just when you think it's, oh man, like the old adage of like, oh, couldn't possibly be worse or what have you, it's like, just where you think you're at the worst or this is it, my grace is sufficient. There's all the more grace to cover that and more.
Amen.
And just to be able to walk in that freedom of like, I'm not condemned. I'm not bound to my sin. When I mess up, I can absolutely say, Father, I'm sorry for grieving your spirit. That's where the whole fear of the Lord concept comes in that it's not that like, oh, God's going to punish me. No, it's quite literally like a husband and wife. You love your wife so much so you're fearful to bringing her any pain. Your thought is, I don't openly want to hurt this person. It's not to say that you guys haven't had arguments and you haven't said anything that you might not have regretted or wasn't necessarily the best thing, but it still doesn't change the fact that in that you have, as a husband, you're saying, this is not okay. I don't want to cause her pain. I don't want to cause her grief. I fear that. Walking in that fear of the Lord, of like, I don't want to bring him hurt. And I know it hurts him, when we don't connect. I know it hurts him when I openly choose to do 180 of what his word tells me not to do. So to see that and to walk in that understanding and be encouraged by that. And like I said, I'm 37. You're my senior. And there's a lot of things that when you speak, I'm listening to, I'm paying attention. And I'm like, if Tim can do it and the Lord can be manifested in his life and use it for his glory, all that you've overcome, all that you've seen, done, participated in, and now to see you where you are at today in the Lord, to see your faith be walked out, to me, it's super encouraging, because I would love to be your age and be like, yeah, but God, it's his grace that was sufficient for me. I'm here today.
Amen. Like some mornings, I'm like, Lord, here I am again, my tail between my legs. And I have to remind myself that I'll never leave you or forsake you. Because I get them, I'll get these like, he's definitely got to hate me now. you know, I just, it's not easy being a Christian. It's easy, and I've said this, it's easier to be in the world, but what's the prize of being in the world compared to the prize of being in heaven?
Mm.
You know, but so many days, you know, and completely convinced prayer life and being in the Word, you have a much better shot of having a better self-esteem and pleasing the Lord and walking in the Spirit.
Mm.
Completely convinced of that. Like, definitely prayer life, definitely in the Word. And then I've had times where I'll go 5 days without being in the Word. And then if I check my attitude, I'm like, oh, yeah, see, you're dope, you know? What are you doing?
Because
You know?
it's
It's our food.
yeah, it's your it's
It's
what contributes to your walk. It's kind of like the person going to the gym. It's how you fine tune your walk. It's how
right.
you fine tune your body in Him, walking this life out. You can't survive. I think, what is it? Human can't survive more than 72 hours without water. So for you to, like you just said, 5 days you haven't picked up the word, you
Yeah.
haven't, and it, again, you're not condemning yourself for it. This is not to say like, but you're aware of it. You're like, huh, this is weird
Yeah.
because this is not my norm. So I get where you're coming from in that, and
Yeah.
I
But
understand that.
sometimes, you know, I'd say, Lord, please give me an unquenchable thirst for your word. Please, Father.
Mm.
You know, I want to grow. I do not want to be, I don't want the old Tim to surface.
I get that.
You
I get
know,
that. That's a reality.
you know, and I want, you know, I got to remind, I'm a new creation in Christ. And and I got to remind myself that about Moses. He was a murderer, you know, and that makes me feel better. Like,
And he's a
you know,
patriarch.
yeah. And David, adultery, you know, he had
Yeah, those
Uriah murdered,
yeah,
right? You know, who did he use? Tax collectors, fishermen, sons of thunder.
yeah. Peter slicing
Yeah,
people's ear off.
yeah. I mean, you know, but he used like,
Saul to Paul.
yeah. Look at Paul. Like, and sometimes like, you know, in Romans where it says I do what I shouldn't do and I don't do what I want to do. You know, it's like I can identify with that 100%. And also I got to watch that I don't use that as an excuse.
Mm.
You know, and I'm always, you know, like I don't want to. I don't want to offend the Holy Spirit. Like, you know, sometimes I have more of a relationship with God than Jesus, you know. Um, it's weird. Like, and it used to be in reverse,
Mm.
you know. You know, one of my I'd say, Lord, help me to love you like you love me. You know,
That's a very
the tool,
significant love.
the
That's a
tool.
tall order.
That's a tall order. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
He gave up his son for you.
yeah, yeah, and that's another thing. I say, Jesus, how did you ever do that? Like, because you know, you think long and hard enough, and you watch the Passion. Like what he's the only one who could have done that. Nobody else would do that. I mean, because he anticipated, he knew what was going to happen. You know, like somebody might say, "Yeah, I'll do it," but you know, he knew it was going to happen, and he did it in spite, knowing how bad the torture. Like, look what they did to him. Like, you know, like it's incomprehensible. It's how do they do it? How does it do these things? You know, like, yeah, love, and that's what I'm finding. Like, if you don't have love, you're just a clanging cymbal. You know, if you don't love the people around you, something's off. Something's really off.
Well, I do.
Excuse me.
No, just please. I do have to ask you though. So we've definitely heard some of your testimony, a little bit of your background. Sinner of sinners, that wretched man that I was. But I see this redeemed individual sitting next to me who I love talking to, and you have $1 million smile. But I have to ask you. I ask everybody this question, and I'm curious to hear what your take is. But given what you know today, having seen where the Lord has taken you out of, and you're standing before the Lord, who is pleased with you, loving Father, what is something you would say to your former self or anyone else who may be struggling with addiction or what have you? Anyone who might quite literally be mirroring your upbringing or your former self. What's a message you would relate to them?
If you can't handle your drinking, it's a dead end. Don't even go down that road, because it's going to hurt you. Well, be wise with your money. Selling my house right now because I'd say be wise with your money. Take advantage of all the lessons and the wisdom that's in the Bible, because there's a ton of wisdom in there. And when you seek wise counsel, listen to it. Like my father always used to say, I'm not telling you this just to hear myself talk. It's for your own good. So, don't make the same mistakes I did, Like, remember my father told me, don't, you're not a college guy. Let's face it. You're not going to, So you're going to work with your back, learn a trade so you make good money, And he told me, learn a trade, all you can learn about houses, and then get in a union where you get all the benefits and all that. And then when you get laid off, you can go swing a hammer for anybody and make a good buck, and you still got the benefits. So that's one of the, I listen to him, 99% of the parents are looking out for you, so they're going to help you. So listen to them, because they lived their life and they got a lot of wisdom, But some people, sometimes you just know you know everything. You get in that mood where you know everything. But I should have listened to my parents a little bit more. Teachers probably should have studied harder. Like I hated math.
Me too.
Hated it. Rarely went to that class.
Well, I had no choice.
And then I become a carpenter, and I have to know all the fractions.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the tape measure.
Math followed, you see?
Yeah.
Yet another reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. Be kind, compassionate, and don't judge. And it's, that's, for me anyway, it's hard not to judge. And then, I give you an example. On Sunday mornings, I come around Lambertsville. I cut through Scotch Plains. I get off 78, and I go by there's a Catholic church, St. Helens there. There's always a lot of people there. And then on the right-hand side, there's all these little soccer fields, turf fields. And I see all these grown men, in their 30s and 40s, playing soccer. And my knee-jerk reaction, I'm like, Yeah, you should be in church. And then I go, hey, stupid, what did you do for 15 years?
Yeah.
You were there. You were on that field with them, you know?
So that's your message. Get off the field and get into church.
Yeah. But, I'm accusing them of what I did, And I'm like, no, I said, hey, worry about your own walk.
Yeah.
When you get on that spiritual high horse, it's easy to look around and go, oh, look at, I know he had a cigarette yesterday, but, just that's his job, So, yeah, just be kind to people. And, sacrifice yourself to people, like people need help, just give them the help, no matter how boring it is. And the treat, like growing up, there was probably a lot of kids I made fun of that were, that had the slide ruler and the pocket protector and stuff. Like, now I don't care who you are. I'll be friendly to you and nice to you, but I wasn't always like that. But and I take no credit. That's the transformation, that's the renewing of the mind that the Lord's changing me. And he, you start thinking with a little wisdom instead of, that schoolyard mentality, like, I run into people a lot and they say, yo, I remember you beat the, when? Don't even remember it. Like multiple guys, like, that I fought, didn't even remember, I guess it was, I was like half drunk or so. I don't know. But, I mean, I'm not talking one or two. I'm talking a half a dozen, to 9 people. Like, and I don't recall beating you up. I said, I'm sorry. I'm not going to have to do it again. Like, I see the guy in the bar. He was huge. And he told, you beat that. And I said, well, am I going to have to? He goes, you're still crazy. I said, I guess so, Yeah. I like, don't drink if you can't handle it. That's number one, because and I'm sure that I've offended a lot of people out there in a drunken stupor. So, when you drink, you're not using your head talking to people. You're not kind. You're not, except, if it's a girl, it's a different story in a bar, then all of a sudden you're a complete gentleman,
I never had that problem. I was not the bar scene. I was not a smooth talker. I had a sense of humor, but that was about it.
Yeah, well, at one point I was going in there at 7:00 in the morning. I'd pull. Yeah, I couldn't
First
go to.
one in, last one out.
I'd pull in. I'd say I'll just have 1 or 2, then go to work, and then 4:30 in the afternoon I'm asleep on the bar.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's a lot of things I would have avoided growing up, and then I think, well, all these different experiences formed who I am.
Yep.
And now,
you could
I present myself to the Lord like, okay, help me change what you want me to change, and let me keep the characteristics. Like, I want to get rid of the character flaws, but I don't want to get rid of the character.
Because he used that.
Yeah, because, like, I have a pretty powerful medical testimony. Like, I'll tell people all the stuff that I've been, and they're going, God, he's got you here for a reason. And that's okay. You open the door. I'm put my foot in that door. We're going to talk about it now.
Mm-hmm.
So
those experiences aid in your witness.
Exactly. In my evangelism, when I could talk to people, and I find that I've always had a pretty sharp quick sense of humor, not, a quick sense of humor, but not a quick brain. Like I'm not a real smart guy. I'm not an intellect. But I could hold a conversation with most. But I don't. If people don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. So I find that, when you're talking to people, like, you don't have to give them the gospel right away. You don't have to shove it right down their throat without who's a stranger, But, you make people laugh. And when people like you, then they're more apt to listen to you. Like we're in a Bible study a couple of years ago, and the guy says, "Oh, I heard this guy curse." I told him, "Who the heck do you think you are?" I said, "Well, you blew it. He ain't going to listen to you. Yeah, right there. You're not going to, because you're condemning his language before even, you don't even know the guy, So, they don't have the discernment. They're in darkness.
I get that, and I have to agree with you. The one thing, like I said, the one thing I appreciate about you is you're Tim out there, you're Tim in here. You're Tim all around. You don't fluff it up. This is, you see what you see is what you get. You love the Lord. You have an amazing sense of humor, but you're not beating people over the head with the Bible. You're not, stomping them into submission. It's like, hey, listen, I'm Tim. This is who I was. I found the Lord. I'm made a new creation. I still have fun. I still love people, and I can appreciate that about you because you're not stringent. You're not bound by, because of this, now I have to be this way, act this way, look this way, sound this way. You're Tim all around. So I love getting to know you, unpacking certain things with you. We had our mutual friend, Jeremy. He's someone that
Talked to him yesterday.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Someone that we've definitely poured into, and and I believe wholeheartedly that God's hand is quite literally over his life. But yet another example of someone that the Lord used you in their life. So yeah, just be encouraging that. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And look forward to seeing you around.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here,
Thank you so much for watching or listening. I pray that episode blessed you. If you enjoyed that, please tune in every month as we'll have a new voice and a new episode. Until next time, God bless.